Coogs House. All right. The Houston Cougars are looking to fill that head coaching vacancy. But what if they take a similar path to one they've taken before? Not the same path, but a similar path. How will that work out?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can step by, plenty of those out there. Please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can listen to Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. That's where you found us. It is so good to see you again. Remember to hit subscribe. We're approaching that 1750 mark. We really are almost there, I believe. Hit 1750. We're going to do some sort of a giveaway to one every 250 subscribers. So hit subscribe. Helps us get there. Like, comment the video. Let us know you're in the contest. If after talking today, you just don't know what to say about all these different younger coaches and the pool out there for potential head coaching positions, tell us in the comments down below if you like brown gravy or white gravy. We are coming off of Thanksgiving week after all. Now, we have a couple different things to talk about. I want to look at coaches that are coordinators, coaching options, I should say, that are coordinators for the University of Houston. Because frankly, I think a lot of us tie their recent successes at the U of H to hiring up-and-coming coaches that are coordinators. Now, admittedly, like when they hired Tom Herman out of Ohio State, offensive coordinator there, pulled him to Houston. He ended up becoming an overnight success for 2 years and then bounced. He went to Texas and didn't do so well. A lot of people get fixated on like these career climbers don't stick around, and that may be the case. However, there's a handful of guys that would be great coaching candidates that are on the younger side of things in their coaching career that are good coordinators that are at least worth a phone call and an investigation to what they would bring to the University of Houston. These are not guys necessarily with head coaching experience. When you're hiring a coordinator, you're going to have a little bit different set of requirements as you're looking at resumes because you're understanding that you're taking a guy hoping for upside because they have not had a head coaching gig yet. You also typically take a younger guy because, generally speaking, if they're like older in their 60s or whatever, or late 50s or even 50s at all, I guess I would say, it's like, okay, well, why hasn't this guy been a head coach yet? What have other people found out that we haven't? So I want to talk about first in the first segment, the probably hottest name on the board nationally and why he'd be a great fit at Houston, even though he has not had any head coaching experience yet. I want to talk about a couple of guys in the second segment that are at currently very large schools, but are just coordinators. And so Houston provide them a chance to be a head coach. And then in the final segment, I got two guys that have been mentioned in different necks of the woods and, are not terrible candidates. I'm just not sure what to make of them being mentioned with the University of Houston job. So let's start off with the hot new candidate, probably the one that most reminds folks of a guy like a Tom Herman in a lot of ways, because he is a young offensive coordinator. He has had some success as he's risen his own career. He's just 34 years old, and that is one Will Stein. Now, Will Stein is the offensive coordinator at Oregon currently. Before that, he actually, if we go all the way back to his playing career, he played at Louisville with under head coach Charlie Strong. That's important in a second. I think because he played his collegiate ball and grew up in Kentucky and is currently in his first year at Oregon, becoming to Texas, he won't know, it taking a long time to build up the connections, high school recruits and stuff like that. And well, I think that's a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. I don't think that's a piece of the puzzle for Will Stein because he plays at Louisville for Charlie Strong. He ends up GAing and gets a quality control coach, which is just an extra assistant coach job there, but then follows Charlie Strong to Texas. While he's with Charlie Strong at Texas, he recruits a lot of Central Texas. He ends up, after that all blows up because Charlie Strong has a not so successful career at Texas, and he had a similar quality control type job. He was not super high up in the staff there necessarily. He gets an associate head coaching and offensive coordinator job at big 6A power like Travis in the Austin area, the same kind of program that put out the Baker Mayfields and Garrett Wilsons of the world, right? He's the offensive coordinator with that kind of talent and developing those kinds of talents and making those kind of connections in and around the Austin area as a head coach. Goes from there to UTSA, a big part of the UTSA offensive staff for a couple of years with Jeff Traylor there. And while I know I talked some about Jeff Traylor's offense being simple this year with Frank Harris, the couple of years that Will Stein was there, it was a lot more explosive. It was not just simple, not necessarily, although we did have good athletes, as simple as like, you can't cover my guy in a fade route, so we're just going to go 4 fades every play or anything like that. There were complexities to the pass game there that had not existed in the year that he has not been there. He also is at UTSA with the same Traylor connections. I made all the connections and inroads to all the different Texas high school staffs. And then after having a successful couple years at UTSA, he's gone to Oregon this year. Now at Oregon this year, they're 11-1, largely because of that offense. A game throwing offense is getting over 540 yards. They're averaging 7.8 yards per snap. That's 2 snap, and you get a first down, and then some, right? That's a lot. The impressive part of it to me, though, is obviously Oregon's got resources. I get that. But he's doing it with Bo Nix, and he's turning Bo Nix into a Heisman candidate type of quarterback. And we've seen Bo Nix bluntly be not good in the past. Bo Nix at Auburn in all 3 seasons had less touchdowns combined than he has this year passing at Oregon in the Will Stein system. And to add insult to injury, and he only has 2 interceptions this season, the thing that kind of plagued him at times in his Auburn portion of his career. Now, at UTSA, his numbers were kind of stagnant around, mid 400 yards total and, between 3 and 4 touchdowns per game. That is on Will Stein's offense. But I also think it's worth pointing out that was a developing program in a lot of ways. And that was a lot of spark, pumping up the blood vein, putting stuff in the bloodstream there when he got there. I like his offense, though, because it's a combination of both deep and short stuff. So like this year, they've got 847 deep play yards to Oregon. That means like yards coming off of plays of over 20 yards. And they have 576 yards on screen pass plays. So they hit you low and short. They hit you deep and close. They kind of hit you with multiple different stuff in the pass game. He's got athletic quarterbacks. But he's got Bo Nix running around like, better than he ever has before. And he's doing this stuff against top-end Pac-12 defenses in the best year of Pac-12 football in recent memory. I mean, we're heading into a championship weekend, and you very realistically could see Nix win the Heisman Trophy for himself by avenging a loss to Washington this weekend, right? Like those kinds of things for Will Stein all work in his favor as an offense coordinator to me because, frankly, they're really, really good on offense, and they weren't as good a year ago. UTSA is not as good on offense, and they were much better the last handful of years. And I think that explosive offense will be fun to see develop with the current wide receivers we have on staff or on roster and those kinds of things, but also B is the kind of thing that can excite and invigorate guys. So the reason I think you lean offense here as opposed to defense, and this is maybe in the weeds for some folks, but the first couple of years, you're probably in a rebuild. There's a lot of things to build up in this program besides the head coaching spot. But if in that rebuild, your competitive games are like 50 to 55, that's a different kind of fun vibe to me for high school recruits to get involved in, for a city to get behind, to reach out with all those different things and build up support for, than if you're like Iowa game. Or like, I think that while winning is ultimately the goal, and I don't mean to say that anything should trump that, finding a coach that will win is important. If you're going to do it with offense, those kind of rebuildy feeling couple of years might actually gain you more favor. Now, that's a long, long way to say there's a lot of offense on this list, but Oregon is actually not the only blue blood I think Houston could take a coordinator from. I got a couple guys that I think are worth mentioning as well, even if they're not as standalone guys as one Will Stein. But first, we did mention something about winning. And if you want to win, you go do it at FanDuel because right now, as the weather gets colder, NFL offers stay hot. New customers get $150 in bonus bets by putting down any $5 moneyline bet and winning at FanDuel.com. It's $150 if your team just wins. So if you think about joining FanDuel, there's no better time joining the action. You got spreads and player props, over-unders, and more. Right now, the Broncos coming to Houston to play the Texans next weekend. The Texans favored by 3.5 points. The money line is minus 180. You put down $5 on that minus 180. You can get up to $150 back in bonus bets if they win this weekend. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Now, I have to say that the NFL team in Houston, the Houston Texans, put together a pretty strong roster in the offseason by drafting our Houston Cougar Tank Dell and also that CJ Stroud guy, right? If you're looking to build your roster for your small business, I understand how dire that can feel right now, but you need to go check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tool you need to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Again, you can find Rookie of the Year MVP combo candidates like CJ Stroud or great Houston Cougars like Tank Dell at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Push up for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post up for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, so in the second segment, I said I want to talk some about a couple of candidates that are also in blue blood schools, not unlike Oregon, although someone from like the 80s would probably remind me that like Oregon was not a blue blood until fairly recently when they got influx of Phil Knight money. These two guys come from schools that have much deeper traditions. In fact, I would almost joke with people that one of them has really just old traditions. But I digress. I want to start by talking about Sherrone Moore. Now, Sherrone Moore is from Michigan. He is 37 years old. He's the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach currently, with Jim Harbaugh being suspended for all of the chaos happening up there in Ann Arbor. Sherrone Moore is serving as the interim head coach as well. In his time in Michigan, he's been the offensive coordinator, the co-offensive coordinator, and the tight ends coach, along with his current OL and OC role. Before that, he was the assistant head coach at Central Michigan. So I think you're seeing there are a lot of different moments of just plain leadership. A great leader of men, it looks like, in many ways. And frankly, for a program that had every reason to be distracted, you're seeing a guy really right the ship there in Michigan. Now, he has had individually plenty of all Big Ten offensive linemen and tight ends under his watch. I think the development of that in a league that is very heavy on O-line and heavy on tight end play is important to take note of. That means when competing with some of the best linemen in the country, he is developing them at a top notch. I don't know that necessarily means that he could do that right away at Houston. We do like graduating a guy like Patrick Paul and so many guys on offensive line with so much experience moving on. Getting someone in here that understands how to develop that part of the football field is going to be really, really important. I've been impressed with how multiple Michigan has been on offense this season. That is to say that they'll line up in an I formation with 23 personnel and run it down your throat. I guess sometimes you still see good old-fashioned 32 personnel, but it's a lot more 23 personnel. You also see them spread out and let J.J. McCarthy wheel it around a little bit. They do a bunch of different things at Michigan, and frankly, their offense, as Moore as the offensive coordinator, has been absolutely on fire this season, even amidst all the controversy. I think Chiron Moore offers an interesting perspective in that he's not a natural Texas guy, but has such a great pedigree. And frankly, while he has not recruited Texas in the same way as other people, again, like I mentioned in the last couple frankly, a couple times already, that's just a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. If he were to bring the same relationship building to the South that he has up there in the Midwest, he's getting dudes from all over the world, all the country, to come to Michigan and play football, right? And so can he bring that same recruiting, recruiting, I should say, really is the inverse of that, relationship building, recruiting. Can he bring that with him to Houston with all the talent that's just in his backyard? I understand it might take a little bit to build that relationship initially, but once it's there, He clearly gets guys that are passionate and care about him. We saw in the post, I chuckled at it on Twitter, he cares about his guys in the same way. We saw after his first win as the interim head coach, after Harbaugh was suspended, how emotional he got when connecting with his players. That's the kind of guy people want to play for. And that's the kind of guy I think you have to, if you're looking to hire coordinators to come in and be a head coach for the first time, a guy with some experience in leadership and a guy that has that kind of connection is really, really important. Now, he's not the only one. I think Jeff Banks at UT Austin is also worth pulling up. Now, he is a special teams coordinator, kind of a little bit off the map. You typically think of we're going to be an offensive team or a defensive team, and we're going to pull in. A special teams coordinator is interesting to me for a couple reasons. Jeff Banks, before we get there too far, should mention is 48 years old, so older than some of these other candidates that we're talking about today, but much younger than the head coach, head coach with the head coaching experience we talked about yesterday in yesterday's episode. He spent 8 years at UTEP. He spent a couple years at Texas A&M. He spent 2 years at Alabama with Sark before ultimately following Sark to Texas, right? At Texas, he's been the tight end special teams, tight ends coach, special teams coordinator, and assistant head coach as well, right? He and Sark are super close. He's in a lot of following of Sark. And if you want any of that magic, that's been following him around, you might want to take a guy off that staff that's very close to him. Now, the reason, and this is, I think, maybe a hotter take or at least a unique, I'm not seeing people point out why this would be good. A special teams coordinator's got an interesting job on a staff because typically they're really more or less a position coach that takes on a lot of extra work, hardworking guy. Second, to coordinate the special teams, you pretty much have to work with the entire roster. Offensive coordinator works with half. Defensive coordinator works with half. Quarterback coach works with 3 or 4 people. Offensive line coach works with, let's say, 15 to 20 people. Defensive line coach works with, let's say, 15 people. As a special teams coordinator, you're going to have a field goal unit with big, strong linemen. You're going to have a kickoff unit with linebacker types, safety types, a kickoff return unit with receiver speed and fullbacks and tight ends. You're going to need to work with kickers and punters. You need to work with all different types of guys on a football team. The special teams coordinator can actually, in certain situations and certain rosters and teams, be a guy that connects the most dots across the football field. And while you think of it as being a thing, special teams you run, you score a touchdown, you get an extra point, and then you kick it off. If they score a touchdown, you have to play extra point defense and take kickoff return. That's 2 plays every, let's say, in a high-scoring game every 7 minutes, every 6 minutes. That's not a whole lot of snaps, but because of how crucial those snaps can be, because we've seen every game turn on special teams, and because of how many different players it takes to have a strong special teams unit, a special teams coordinator is actually typically a fairly important leadership role on a football team. Jeff Banks does that at UT Austin. He does that with Sark, and he is, again, tagged as the assistant head coach because of his role as a leader. As far as recruiting goes, he has recruiting ties from his time at UTEP, his time at A&M, his time at UT. Frankly, when he and Sark were at Alabama, he was the guy circling the state of Texas with several other guys looking for Alabama-type Texas guys across the state. I think he would do well in recruiting greater Houston area. As far as what kind of offense or defense he runs, obviously that'd be dependent on who he brought in with him. But I think very, very highly of the idea of bringing in a special teams coordinator because of how important that can be to gelling an entire roster, an entire team, and the leadership it shows for a guy to have that on his resume. He's been tied so much to the job loosely, so I'm not just drawing this out of thin air either. Sherrone Moore, I think, frankly, is just a kind of a pipe dream kind of guy. Like, if we're going to get a coordinator, like, he's one of the best in the country right now, right? And so looking for guys like that. But Jeff Banks really does have some ties to the area and ties to the state of Texas, and I think it's a very natural fit. Now, I can understand if you say you don't want a coordinator. I can understand if you say, like, I need the explosive offense. I don't know what his offense is going to look like. I understand arguments for other people. I don't think there's a strong one against Jeff Banks, if that makes sense, right? You can argue for others, but I don't know that there's a strong one against Jeff Banks. Now, a couple guys that are getting rumored into this that I think they kind of do have arguments against, although I do see the argument for, I want to talk about in the third segment. But first, I want to talk some about how you can win, just like we're hoping our Houston Cougars can as well. And that's going to prizepicks.com/locked on for site out there. It is this cool equinox. You got football championship weekend. The NFL is ramping up to important regular season games leading up to playoffs. The NBA's got the in-season tournament, regular season games, college basketball is going on. And with all those kinds of things happening at once, you can do all kinds of cool crossover daily fantasy bets across all the different sports and put your sports knowledge to the test, because you can do things like combining Travis Kelce and LeBron James, catches and three-pointers made. Let's say 10.5 is the over-under. You say, okay, I got over because Kelsey's going to get 7 catches. LeBron James is going to make 4 threes, money in the bank. And when that happens, when that fourth three goes through, it's a West Coast game, assume that's later. When the fourth three goes through, you win. Now, they also this cool option thing going with a reboot policy where if your guy gets hurt in the first half, so when you put some, coin on the stats for somebody, they get hurt in the first half, and then they don't come back in the second half, you get rebooted, your pick gets rebooted. You do not lose just because the guy got hurt early on. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with that type of insurance policy. So make sure you check them out at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first plus match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, go win today. Now, there's a couple of coordinators I mentioned that I'm looking still for the connection to. They're getting tied because I think they're talented, but I'm like, I don't see it with one of these guys, and the other one, I'm not sure that he's as talented as the rest of the bunch. The first one, I think, Brennan Marion is a talented coordinator. He's the offensive coordinator at UNLV. He's a clear career climber, and I think that's admirable. And frankly, there's an argument to be made that for a guy career climbing at 36, getting the head coaching job in the city of Houston at the University of Houston in a Power 5 conference would be like a job he could sit still at, right? Offensively, his a lot of 12 personnel, pretty balanced and run and pass, getting over 420 yards a game. Again, a fun offense to watch, and watching clips get ready to talk about this tonight. Like, oh, this guy's got a fun offense. I get why he's an attractive candidate on the field. The career climber thing, he has never been at any job longer than 18 months. And in some ways, again, you could tell me in this fan base that he's going to settle at Houston and he'll be here longer than those 18 months, right? It's not just his first head coaching job to then go get another head coaching job. However, I read the resume and it's hard for me to believe that. He's been at Arizona State, Oklahoma Baptist, Howard, William & Mary, Hawaii, Pitt, Texas, and now UNLV. Now, he's done some recruiting in Texas as he's gone across there. I mentioned when he he worked at, I should say, UT Austin. And when he was at UT Austin, I guess I should point out that he was the pass game coordinator in 2022. Pretty strong pass game there. Had Quinn Ewers never gotten hurt, right? So, like, I get why that's the game there. He's also a wide receivers coach at a bunch of his different position stops. You see a bunch of great wide receiver talent grow up in and around Houston. Getting to keep the top end of that home would be really, really nice. The detraction I see here and thing I don't get is he seems like a kid. I mean, he's coached high schools in California. He's coached high schools in the Northeast. He's from Pennsylvania originally, but went to Tulsa. He's coached as far west as Hawaii and as far east as William & Mary. Again, he's been all over, right? So Houston could very well be, and my hesitation is just his next stop, not his long-term stop. Coaches are either fired or going to be fired. There's not a whole lot of guys that get to live out a career that don't get one of those two at the stop they're in, right? So I get that too. That is part of this. However, as I look at his resume, I'm like, you know what? Can we see him be a head coach at, I don't know, let's say some group of 5 and last there for a couple years before he moves, or even a Power 5, and we'll poach him from then too, but somewhere for a hot minute to where he sits still for a second, long enough to get a real evaluation on how he's done while he's there, and a real evaluation on whether he's going to stick anywhere or not and have success there for more than 18 months. Again, he's had success at his stops for 18 months. I don't mean to say that he has not. I hope that doesn't come off as pejorative, but I do think I need to see him have sustained success in one of those places, which also makes me question how Sean Lewis gets tied into this. Sean Lewis is 37. I think I point out that Brennan Marion is 36. Sean Lewis is 37. He was Colorado's offensive coordinator last year. And before that, he was the Kent State head coach. So unlike a lot of these guys, he's got head coaching on his resume. Colorado seasons, even we did not. Credit to them on that one. They played a double overtime game with Colorado State, and they lost a lot of games in a row at this point. Offense had trouble protecting Shador. You could argue their best receiver was actually a defensive back. I mean, all kinds of problems. And again, it was year one for the Deion Sanders era, Coach Prime, et cetera, right? But Sean Lewis's role as the offensive coordinator is questioned by me because he came off of a Kent State head coaching career where he was 24-31 as an offensive head coach. They did not put up great numbers offensively in any of those seasons. And frankly, you could argue that Colorado did not do very well offensively in the grand scheme of things this season with how much talent they had at a couple different skill position spots. Shador Sanders being chief among them. The thought that they would lose so many games they did, I think. And again, the Pac-12 is good. Right, Pac-12 is good, but like at Kent State, Sean Lewis never won more than 7 games as a MAC team. And for what it's worth, and looking at his long coaching career, again, he started coaching 2007 at a high school in Illinois. Kent State is actually, I believe, as far south as he's gone. My geography is not great on some of this, but I believe Kent State is as far south as he's been. So I don't think he's going to necessarily, again, recruiting the state of Texas is one thing, not the only thing. But if you told me, okay, look, he's got, he's a growing offensive coach. He's just 37, and he really knows Texas, that'd be a puzzle piece in his favor. When you don't have that, I'm like, okay, so what is the thing that's putting him in conversations with this? Why is he considered a candidate? Again, could he be? He's 37. He may go be a successful coach at somewhere else and make me eat all my own words, and power to him for doing it. I just don't think he's as hot a name as the other guys. And I don't really get why he's a commodity type name out there right now, aside from the fact that he was somewhat tangentially tied to Coach Prime. Now, I know that, frankly, because every team has 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 coordinators out there, there are a lot of coordinators out there that could be head coaching candidates for our Houston Cougars. If you like one of the ones I mentioned, tell me down below. If you like someone else that's a coordinator that could be a head coach for the Houston Cougars that I did not mention, someone you think that's a realistic or somewhat realistic or even kind of sort of maybe kind of realistic candidate, tell me in the comments down below. I want to take that. I'm going to try and run. I'm balancing a lot of things. I'm trying to figure out how to talk about all the different head coaching options that there are for Houston as we move forward with this and digest them bit by bit, while also we had a massive basketball game this Friday against Xavier. I know Xavier, I believe they lost actually on Monday night, somewhat surprisingly. So we got a lot of things to balance with talking about the football season and transitioning, and the basketball season in the middle of a great season for them. The women's basketball team is also undefeated. Volleyball team made the tournament. A lot of exciting things happening for the Cougs. So if you want to find me and talk about any of them, you can find me at Painsworth 512 PAINSWORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, whatever. Painsworth 512. And you can find the show each and every day wherever you get your podcast at Locked On Cougs. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. For your second listen, Locked On Big 12 has a familiar name for who could be the next head coach of the Houston Cougars, as well as other information about the conference. So make sure you go check out Drake and Locked On Big 12. Thank you all again so much for making us your first listen today. Locked On Cougs, primary Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Cougs, every day. Go Cougs.